One of my best friends once told me that he knows who his true friends are because they ask questions about his life. And not only that, but they ask meaningful questions about his life, not just small talk, but they're actually trying to learn something about him, about his family, about his circumstances. And you can tell that based on their questions. In my mind, asking good questions and being able to formulate good questions is one of the most important skills that people can have in life, not only with relationships, but certainly with research. And that could be research from even, trying to learn more about a product online to, writing a doctoral thesis. You have to be able to ask the right questions to be efficient and to find the right information. All right, so I did not prepare this slideshow. I found this on Purdue University's College of Education website. You can see the information there if you want to look into it further. But what we're going to talk about today is what is an essential question and how do I write effective essential questions? So an essential question is one that lies at the heart of a subject, and you have your theme, right? So it's a question that lies at the heart of that theme. It also promotes inquiry. That means more questioning, or also the searching of information and the uncoverage of a subject. Now, uncoverage is a key word. It's a buzzword in education. And it just means that there are many layers of information associated with the question. So this is really important, actually. So an essential question is not a question that could be answered by memorization. You can't just memorize some answers and have an answer to an essential question. It's not that there's a right or a wrong necessarily answer to this, but there are many paths that kind of lead forth from your question. They go in a lot of different directions, and that's what I think makes them a lot more interesting and a lot more realistic, because most things in life don't have yes or no answers. Most big ideas or big dilemmas that we face in life have like a multitude of answers, or a multitude of paths that we can take, or journeys that we can take to try to solve them or to come to new understandings. This is kind of review of what I just said. They don't have a right answer, not a simple one at least. They provoke and sustain more questions and more searching and researching. They address conceptual or philosophical foundations. They really try to get to the heart of the theme. They raise more questions, and that's I think also the fun of it. That there's not just a set ending to your research, but that in the end you might have even more questions. At the end of your research, you might have even more questions than you did at the beginning. They naturally and appropriately recur. That means they'll come back to you later in life. You'll be doing something later in life, and you'll remember this research because it'll be meaningful. And it's a big idea that comes back to us at different times in our lives. And they stimulate vital, ongoing rethinking. And that's kind of what I was just mentioning. It's something that we'll be dealing with in the future, not just for the project, but that will kind of guide our thinking as we move forward in life. All right. So let's look at some examples of essential questions. Now, the first one kind of violates our rule of being a yes or no question. It says, can a fictional story be true? Um, I would rather phrase it with a how instead of a can. How might a fictional story also be true? I think that to me would be a better question, because then you're looking for the ways. If you say, can a fictional story be true? You say yes. Okay, well, that's just the answer that follows. Um, of course, this one, it leads to further research. If you just said yes, you kind of have to explain how it can be true. But I like more ambiguity. I like something like, how can fictional stories have historical truths, or something like that. And because then you have so many different paths that you can follow. If you just answer this question yes, then you're just going to be trying to prove it true. Your yes answer, you're trying to prove that true. And you're really kind of starting out from a point of confirmation bias. Whereas if you have an open-ended question, you're not trying to necessarily prove anything, but you're just trying to let your research evolve and kind of keep moving and learning more about it as you go. How do a region's geography, climate, and natural resources affect the way people live and work? Well, that's a huge one. That's a big question, right? And there are many, many questions that follow from that. How does technological change influence people's lives, society? That's a great one. That's pretty broad, but that's a kind of an introductory research question and something that more questions will follow from. How does what we measure influence how we measure? Yeah, that's kind of a great one for science class. How do we classify the things around us? See, a lot of these are how questions, and if you're struggling to write a good essential question, maybe try to reformulate your wording by beginning with how. Okay. Do artists have a responsibility to their audience and to society? Again, that's a yes or no question. If you say no, you've already locked yourself in and excluded half of your research. And if you say yes, you've done the same thing. So I like, what responsibilities do artists have to their audience? Okay, I mean, then you're not locked into one side of it or to society. You're not locked into one side of that argument, but instead you're exploring kind of the complexity of the argument without shutting out the other 50% of the possible research. How does language shape culture? That's better than saying, does language shape culture, right? How does language shape culture? Now you've made it a broad, open-ended question. Is pain necessary for progress in athletics? Okay, you give us a thought for a second. All right, so how could you rephrase, is pain necessary for progress in athletics, into an open-ended question? Just give it 10 seconds of thought. I'm going to go with, how can pain help athletes progress in their sport? How can pain help athletes progress in their sport? Or how might pain help athletes progress in their sport? Um, so that would make it a broad question and give us room for exploring rather than just saying yes or no and then having to try to prove that. Okay, we can look at, no, that's enough. I think you get the hang of it. But again, just as a tip, if you're struggling and you keep coming up with yes or no questions, then maybe try how. Try to begin it with how. Or even why. Or, so how and why are good ways to go for those. And you can see that most of the questions we've looked at here. Well, here's a can, but that's going to be a yes or no question. We rephrase that into a how, and these are all how questions. So how, why, those are the ways to go. So if you're struggling, try to rephrase it using that, and then you should be fine. Okay, I hope this helps. If you have any questions, send me an email, and looking forward to seeing the questions and your research that follows.